Singapore is a very progressive society, but in this aspect, we seem to be still a little bit very traditional. Like the mom is the one who does the majority of the child rearing and raising children. Why do you think we're still holding on to that notion?
Well, to be fair, I think it's changing. It's partly a generational thing, and then I think partly cultural. There are some dads, obviously, who still think that it's not really part of what they do. But I find that the younger dads very much want to be involved. Their difficulty was that they couldn't get the employer on board, especially when it was voluntary.
Parental leave got a major upgrade at this year's National Day rally. Dads will soon get 4 weeks of mandatory government-paid paternity leave, and by April 2026, there will be 10 weeks of shared leave to be split between the couple. Could this be the game-changing move that couples need to support their aspirations to start and grow their families? Welcome back to The Usual Place, and I'm your host, Natasha. If this is your first time watching or listening to The Usual Place, do like and subscribe to the show so you can get notified when we drop new content. So in the studio with me for this episode is our very special guest, Minister Indranee Rajah. Welcome. This is your first time on the show, so thank you for being with us.
And thanks for having me.
No worries. We're going to get into it, but just to set the context for the viewers, you're actually a minister in the Prime Minister's office and you oversee the National Population and Talent Division, which comes under the strategy group, yeah?
I work with SMTO on this, but I oversee the marriage and parenthood portion as well.
Okay, and parenthood is what we want to talk about today, and I'm going to dive into whether this latest move will influence couples to have babies and whether it will change their mind about raising children. So we're about 2 weeks out after the National Day rally, and I wanted to find out what kind of feedback has the team gotten, like any unusual comments from people, or what have you been hearing so far?
I wouldn't say unusual, but yeah. I think the first reaction that came in was that young parents were really happy about this, and we're glad about that. Because the main impetus behind the shared parental leave was the feedback that we were getting from young parents about their desire to have more time with newborns, especially in the early months. I think many people would have the feedback we got was that the first 18 months is really important.
Yeah.
But as they get older, then you have the infant care options and so on. But it was the early months that they wanted to spend time with the children. So we looked at it and we said that, this is a good thing to do, but we also want to signal that it should be for not just the mums to do it, but the dads as well.
Yeah,
so
we'll
that's
get
why we
to that in a bit. Yeah.
But and in terms of reactions, employers too. Employers largely supportive, but they had concerns about the operational parts. So you can see that the way the whole leave system is designed, it takes into account the employer's feedback as well. So I think that's the broad reaction that we have had. Very much welcomed by parents, welcomed cautiously by employers who are supportive overall, but just concerned about the operational part.
Okay, I wanted to ask about the timing of why now, what pushed the government to announce these changes now, and what were some of the behind-the-scenes discussions that took place in the lead-up to this announcement? Yeah.
Okay, when I first got this portfolio, which was back in 2020, one of the first things that I did was to start having conversations with couples, with those who weren't married, with those who were just married, no children, and with those who were married and have young children, to understand the broad spectrum of concerns and what it is, that young parents are thinking about. So there were several things. Aspirational part is one big broad bucket, meaning some may not want to have children because for various reasons they want to defer, etc. But then for those who wanted to have children, we found that there were a few things that they were concerned about. One was, can they get housing? Second was the cost of raising the child. Third was the infant care places. Then after that, childcare. So we set about tackling these one by one. You would have noticed that in the last few budgets, we've had something, right? So we increased the baby bonus cash gift.
Yeah.
That was really to help with the cost when the child is born. Then we have the CDA top-ups, the Child Development Account. We enhanced the First Step Grant. That's the amount that the government gives out free and clear. And then we've got the government co-matching. So for every dollar that the parent puts into the CDA, the government matches as well. And then we've been working on the infant care portion to see how we can increase infant care places as well as infant caring options. Childcare, don't forget, we've also expanded the number of childcare places and lowered the fee caps so that a larger number of parents can access and it's affordable. So that left time with the newborns. And that was what led us to the shared parental leave. And that was interesting because we remember we started off with increasing paternity leave on a voluntary basis. Before it was 2 weeks mandatory, then we gave additional 2 weeks voluntary. And we were watching it. And we realized that there were dads who wanted to take it, but somehow felt discouraged at work because, the employers didn't really have an arrangement in place because it wasn't mandatory. So that was like, okay, we need to make this mandatory. So that's step one. Then the other part was, let's see what we can do about giving them more time. So the current shared parental leave arrangement is that mum has 16 weeks of maternity leave. Dad has 2 weeks mandatory, 2 weeks voluntary. But the shared parental part, the dad can draw on 4 weeks out of the mum's 16 weeks. But the thing is that then the dads were feeling, I'm taking away.
Stealing it from the mom.
I'm stealing it from the mum, right? And they felt bad about doing that. And so we thought that actually whatever parental leave we give should be applicable and can be taken by both the mum and the dad. And then to send a signal, we said default position is half-half. Because we want to send the signal that, for the fathers, being involved in child raising is very important as well. All the studies show that.
I mean, since you brought it up, let's talk about men.
Okay.
Because to me, Singapore is a very progressive society, but in this aspect, we seem to be still a little bit very traditional. Like the mum is the one who does the majority of the child rearing and raising children. Why do you think we're still holding on to that notion?
Well, to be fair, I think it's changing. It's partly a generational thing, and then I think partly cultural. In the Asian context, very typically, it's expected that the mum is the one who looks after the children and the dad is the breadwinner and earns the income for the family. But of course, in Singapore, where you have a meritocratic society, and from day one when we started out with the Women's Charter and with universal education, really, for women, having a working career is something which is very much on the cards as well. So once you have a society where women also work and where women also have careers, and then if you also expect them to bear the full
it's a lot.
Responsibility for child raising, then it's very difficult. And the only way that you can balance this is if both parents take part in child raising. But quite apart from the sort of the economic part of it, there's also the other aspect, which is that a child really does benefit from both mum and dad being involved in child raising from the early years. All the surveys show that for the children where the fathers as well as mums are involved in the early years, there are better life outcomes. I think emotionally that they are better,
adapt better
because their parents are involved. So we wanted to make this societal shift, and I think a key part of it is to have the employers on board.
Okay, but I think I remember a statistic about how there was paternity leave, but not maybe half of them were taking it. Not many. So what would you say to men who are still on the fence? Because I would think that they would be concerned about their careers. I mean, let mom take the care of the kid, but let the other parent go to work and then build that as well. I think maybe some of them might have that concern. So what would you say to fathers to be about taking paternity leave? Yeah.
I would definitely encourage dads to take paternity leave. So for government paid paternity leave, when we first introduced it, the take-up rate was 25%, but now latest figures 53%. So when we try to understand why, there's still this gap and it's not being taken up, there's a mixture. There are some dads, obviously, who still think that it's not really part of what they do. But I find that the younger dads very much want to be involved. Their difficulty was that they couldn't get the employer on board, especially when it was voluntary. In fact, some of the overall bosses, the CEO is on board, right? But it's your line manager, it's the immediate supervisor who is saying that, who's going to cover your work when you're away? This might affect your promotion prospects.
Your appraisals.
And things like that. Yeah. And I think that, so it comes back to what I was saying earlier. If you want the dads to take the leave, the workplace also has to change. It should become a norm that fathers take parental leave, but equally it must then become a norm that the fathers and the mothers, because we've got shared parental leave, should work with the employers to make sure that there's covering arrangements, that the transition is smooth, so that the employer doesn't worry so much about somebody being out, on parental leave for a certain number of weeks. Yeah. And that is the other shift that has to take place. So the first one is a mindset shift. Dads have to see themselves as part of it. But the second is a cultural shift in the workplace also.
Yeah, which brings me to my next question about, it takes a village to raise a child, right? They always say, right? So in this, you need the workplace or people in the workplace. So, and I think it's not just the bosses. I think it's also colleagues. Because for me, as a single person who probably will never have kids, I'm sorry. I'm not contributing to this conversation. I'm still contributing to this conversation. But you have to cover for your colleagues who who go away, right? And we want them to enjoy the time with their families, but it's an additional workload. I think we should be honest about, someone you have to cover for a colleague who's not here. So what do you say to people who might not be on board? Like, not just the CEO or top managers, like your colleagues.
I would say this, that whatever workplace you're in, the workplace needs to be designed in a way that allows for these flows. Because don't forget, it may not just be parents who need to take parental leave. If you are single, for example, you may need to take leave because you have an aged parent or a sibling to look after. There are many reasons why people may have to take leave, perhaps not quite as long, but whatever it is. So the workplace is slowly becoming more flexible. And the rigid arrangements of specifically 9 to 5 or doing work from a particular venue, that's all changing, because you can have flexi place, flexi load, flexi work, right? So if a workplace is designed well, then you need a few things to happen. Firstly, the employers and HR especially needs to be progressive and design for this in advance. Then second thing is, if somebody needs to take quite a lot of time out, you want advance notice to help you to plan, which is why in the upcoming rules and regulations, we will be saying that parents will have to give at least 4 weeks notice in advance, so that people, the employers will know and can make arrangements. And because the leave is flexible and you can take it within the space of a year from the child's birth, you must work out, you must plan, see who you can get to cover, talk to your employer. And if you're working on a project, you say, this is what needs to be done. This is the point at which I will hand over. I will help somebody to onboard. So that part has to be done. And the other thing is, don't forget, this is government paid leave, which means that the government will pick up the tab for the employee's salary up to 2,500 per week or 10,000 a month. And that means that frees up the salary which the employer would otherwise have paid to pay for somebody else. Or if your colleagues are actually taking on additional workload, employer can consider allocating some of this pay.
Bonus.
Yeah. Well, not bonus, but because you're doing extra work.
Yeah. Just
give them extra pay. Because that's fair, right?
I can get on board with this.
So you
take all the leave you want.
Yes, you have to do the work too.
Yes.
But you need really good HR for this. You need HR who can manage this, and have that negotiation, conversation, compromise, and really a more flexible workplace.
Okay. You mentioned something about people taking leave. We might take leave for various reasons, especially when we have to take care of somebody at home, right? So it may not be a newborn or a young kid. So at this National Day rally, there might have been some people who might have said, what about me? Because, you got parental leave, but what about, elder care leave? And some people might have felt a little bit left out. So, is the government looking into the concerns of these other groups? I mean, what's your take?
Well, must remember that National Day rally is only sort of a finite amount of time.
It's an hour and a half. Okay, got it, got it.
And in the course of the year, you work on different things, right? So you can't announce everything all at one go and meet all needs all at one go. And every budget, we have that same question because budget will actually have things for certain groups and then the other groups will say, what about me?
Yeah.
So for this National Day rally, you may remember PM talked about the housing portion and how we will enable or give priority for those who want to live near parents or children who want to live near parents or parents who want to live near children. And that in some way will help because one of the reasons for wanting to live near your parents is the mutual help and support. So this may not necessarily take the form of leave, but it actually is a way of helping those who want to give caregiving or look after, have the parents look after the younger children. I mean, other requests for other types of leave we can examine and look at.
We're going to be a leave nation. Everybody's got like leave.
Yeah, because employers are saying, but who's going to be around to work? So that's the reason why flexible work arrangements is a very key strategy. I think it has not been fully absorbed and realized how flexible work arrangements can make a very definite shift and address some of these concerns, because it's quite difficult to be legislating for every single sort of leave in advance. And you also don't know what type of situations may arise where you suddenly need leave. So we do have the fixed things like the shared parental leave, etc. But when the children are of certain age, or let's say you have elderly parents, the flexible work arrangement part makes a big difference. Flexible work arrangements does not equal work from home. It can be done from home, but flexible work can also mean working part-time. It can mean doing work in blocks or in modules. And it can also mean working not from the office, but either at home or in some other location. The key thing, I think, is the work must get done. And how do you get it done? So, I mean, so long as you get the work done and you help with your employers, meet your employers' targets and so on, then where you do it, and the timing,
when you do it,
when you do it, I think those are things that can be arranged, right? So I think people must see flexible work arrangements as a really important strategy, especially with an aging population and when you have young children that you need to look after.
Yeah. I remember I worked with someone who had just given birth, and she used to send emails at like after 10 when she put down her kids to work. And then sometimes we did calls at 10, which was kind of, you have to accommodate us. I was okay because it was a newborn. And it was...
During the COVID period, that was very common. Many parents would say between the 8 o'clock at night to 10 o'clock, they couldn't do stuff because they wanted to put the children to bed and do homework or whatever. But after 10, they were like on the computer. You also want them to have rest, and COVID was an exceptional period. But I think the one thing that the COVID did was to show us that this can be done. And then how we translate it now that we're back into the new normal is really up to us to have a workable arrangement.
So the call here is to get workplaces to be more flexible.
Yes, according to your needs, which is another reason why we have not prescribed what type of flexible work arrangements, because it's going to differ from sector to sector.
And company to company.
And company to company.
So whatever works for the company, as long as the work gets done, then you should. Okay. So the reason why we are having parental leave and all these schemes to help, we mentioned a whole bunch of them at the start of it. Do you think the enhancements to the parental leave scheme will move the needle for Singapore's birth rate in the long run?
I think if you take each one in isolation, the answer will be maybe not. But when you put them all together, the cumulative effect of what we're trying to do, which is that relieve some of the cost concerns, give time at work for work-life balance, give time for parents to bond with children, ensure priority for couples who are married with young children for their housing, because don't forget, on the housing side, they now get priority if they are married or have children when they're applying for their BTO. When you put it all together, what you're coming up with is a Singapore that's very conducive for families. What we say is a Singapore made for families. And when you have that, then hopefully it will encourage those who would like to have children to have them.
Okay, so I have to ask you a question about whether do you think couples are overthinking it? Because our parents used to just like have kids, right? Like, I mean, I don't know. I was talking to some older friends and they were like, yeah, you guys are like overthinking and you want this, the money and everything. So what's your take? Do you think couples are overthinking having children? They should just have them and then just go with
I mean, you can't really sort of make that kind of generalization because for each individual it's different. But I do think it's part of a generational thing. When you look at couples who are in the 60s and 70s, where Singapore was at a very different stage of development, it was like, well, basically, it was a young country. You're having a job, new career. Things are the trajectory is always upwards. At this point, it's a developed country. Or much more developed than it was before. We've got so many more options of things to do, to travel, to get involved in causes, to have opportunities at work.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about the women in the workforce today compared to the women in the workforce in the 60s, 70s, very different. And now women also want to pursue their own careers. So there's an opportunity cost. There are other things that people have in mind. But I think the more important thing for each generation is to ask yourselves, would I like to have a family? And if I would, how can I make it work? So I would say, so long as you want to have a family, government's here to support. And you can be assured that you will have we're moving towards a society that's family friendly. So I wouldn't worry too much about overthinking it. I mean, society's here to make it work.
Support, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, on that note, can we expect the government to be bolder with initiatives to encourage Singaporeans to have children? Or can I even ask, like, would there be announcements to promote couples to marry, for example? They get like hanging out leave, like on Fridays, singles get half day off, go to the bar, meet some people, do an activity. I don't know, will there be like bolder initiatives in the future?
I'd have to say that's not quite what we're looking at. And that's part of, that's part of life. But I think that what going online has done is that it has taken away a little bit of what people used to do a lot more of before, which is meet people in person, face to face, hang out, negotiate complex social relationships and situations, right?
Yeah.
I think some of that has been taken away by people going online. And I think that is something that we need to rediscover, which is really the inherent enjoyment of being able to meet people, have good conversations, suss out whether, this is somebody with whom I have chemistry, and be able to take it from there.
Yeah. And want to start
you can't legislate this, and you just need to let people go with the flow.
Okay, I got it. Okay. Well, thank you, Minister, for coming on the show and being very candid with us. I hope when the next announcement comes about families, you'll come back on and we can discuss it then again.
Yes, and we certainly hope that this recent slew of measures will encourage marriage and parenthood in Singapore.
Maybe we should come back in a year and then we'll dissect the numbers. Okay. Well, so I want to hear from you too. What changes would you like to see that will make balancing work and growing your family easier? Drop your thoughts in the comment section of this video. And while you're there, like, subscribe, or hit the notification bell to get fresh content from The Usual Place. Now, if you want to listen to the podcast version of this episode, you can catch our show on many platforms. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on the ST app. You can also find me on Instagram at theusualplace_net. I will see you next time at The Usual Place. See you!